groups. Particularly if you have a large class, then I think this is really, are you really getting enough interaction? Could I redesign that large class so that students are more active, I'm more involved with interacting with the students, they're getting the information, I'm not delivering it, but I'm spending more time with the class. That kind of decision. So let's look at the students. Who benefit most from fully online learning? Well, interestingly, 85% of all the distance students at UBC, I think that's probably gone down a little bit, but it's still pretty high, are full-time students wanting more flexibility. They're often students who are in their 4th year of a bachelor's program, can't get into a class because it's either or need an extra class because they they've got out of sync over the 3 or 4 years, and they can take an extra class by studying online, and that's by far the biggest majority. And also some of the students wanting more flexibility. Then there's another group of students that are very different, and they are lifelong learners wanting new qualifications or upgrading. They may be already graduates of Vancouver Community College, they're out in the workforce, but they want to come back. They may be an engineer moving into management, for instance, so they want a business administration course. Remote isolated students, yes, true, that's often people's image of a distance learner, but in fact they're a very small minority. Most distance learners are urban and live within 1 hour of a campus. Independent learners, students who just actually rather learn on their own. They don't like coming to class, they don't want the campus, and they could be all kinds of people. They could be mature people who've been through college and university, but they like to learn on their own. And increasingly students needing 21st century skills because they see online learning as a good way to get those, and their employers see that as well. If you can do this course you can do this course online on your own without going to a college, that tells me a lot about the skills you can bring to the workforce. Then the subject requirements. What do students need to know, which is I call content? So, for instance, hematology might be the content of the course. So you have to know things about hematology, like blood and how blood is made and so on. And then skills, what must they be able to do with that knowledge? So an example of a skill, this is a student looking down a microscope in order to identify analytes, analyze the glucose and insulin levels, and interpret the results. Now, to do that, they have to have knowledge, but it's not the same as just knowing something. It's actually using that knowledge to do something, like the analysis. So one thing you can do is set up a little chart, not very difficult. Now again, there's no set of rules out there about what's best done online and what's best done face-to-face. I have my own views, and you'll get more views as you get more experience. But in the end, it comes down to an individual instructor looking at the kind of course they're teaching and making some decisions about what's best done online and what's best done face-to-face. So I said learning theory and terminology is best done online. They can do that quite easily. But if they actually want to see an analyte under a microscope and they have to know how to manipulate the microscope in order to do that, that's probably best done face-to-face. Now, I won't confuse the matter by saying we're now getting remote labs for teaching physics and biology, but that's another matter. Video of interactions under the microscope, which might be impossible to get all the interactions that you want them to see. It's very hard sometimes to create that in the lab, but you can actually get a video where they can see it. Well, they can do that online. And if they had to insert glucose, physically do that and make sure that they did it properly, then you probably want them to do it hands-on. So it's not an either-or, everything online or not. I'm talking about the kind of students who will come to campus anyway, but I'm talking about hybrid learning here. If you want to teach fully at a distance, you've got to find other ways to do those things that are face-to-face. Or you don't teach that program online because it can't be done. It's too expensive and too difficult. The next element you have to take into account when choosing where on that is your resources, and particularly your knowledge, time and skills. Are you familiar with teaching online? It's a lot easier to do something a bit different if you've already done online teaching, whereas if you're doing it for the first time, it's going to take more time because you've got to learn. So, and what skills have you got? Are you happy using technology or not? The second is what kind of support can you get? what kind of learning technology support, instructional web design, experienced colleagues. Very important. If you can work with a colleague who's already done something in your subject area, who's got experience of using technology, and and can work with them as a team. So maybe he's teaching one course and you're teaching another, and you can learn from that instructor. That's a really good bridge into getting, as Gary says, getting into it for the first time. What kind of technology do you have available? Do you have a learning management system? Has your learning technology unit made it easy for you to do blogs or for your students to do blogs? And open education resources. What resources are available online? And there's a lot of talk about open education resources, but when you try to find the exact piece of thing that you want and don't want to have to create it, it's often very hard to find. So you know, it's not a guarantee that there is stuff out there. It will be there eventually, but it's not there now. So blended, hybrid, or distance will be determined by an analysis of your own teaching philosophy, what you're comfortable with, the students or the potential students you want to reach, the needs of the discipline, and the resources available. And what I suggest that you should be aiming for is what I call advanced online course design, where the core skill that you're trying to teach, whatever the subject matter, is knowledge management. How do students manage the knowledge in this area so that they continue to learn after they've left college? How to find, analyze, and evaluate and apply information. Use of open content within a learning design is not just throwing the students to the wolves and telling them to go off and find whatever content they want. You have a learning design, but it provides a fair degree of flexibility for the learners as to how they get to the outcomes that you're recommending. Student-generated multimedia content, online project work, and assessment by e-portfolios. So that's what I would call an advanced online course design. Now, who should make the decision about where on the continuum your course should be? Should it be you as the instructor? Should it be done as a team? Or should it be the senior administration? Well, my view is that this is best decided on a program level. If you think about students coming in as dependent learners and you wanting them to go out as independent learners, they're probably not going to do it in one course, but it's going to take a program to move them to that. So it will make a lot of sense to talk about, well, what are we going to do in first year? What are we going to do in second year? Who's going to do what in this? Who's got the experience in the team? What course? So that kind of discussion, I think, is really critical. So the other option, and I haven't seen anybody do this, so this is my pushing the boundaries here. Could we develop a course that could be taken anyway? In other words, if a student wanted to do it all on campus, yes, there's the facilities for doing that. If they wanted to do it completely online, it's the same course, same outcome, same exam. Yes, they can do that because we have stuff up on the web and they can do the whole thing on the web. Or if students wanted to blend, they could still do that. Could we design a course that way? My question to you is, what mechanisms does Vancouver Community College have for this kind of decision? Do you already have program teams, for instance? Because if you do, it makes it a lot easier. If you already have program teams that sit down and discuss curriculum, then I'm suggesting if you don't do that already, you should not only be discussing curriculum, but how should we deliver this program? And what kind of students would it be best for? And what's the best mix of online and face-to-face for our students? That will be part of that curriculum development process, which might either take place after a program review or for a new course or program. But again, the question is, do you have a mechanism for doing that? So next steps, well, I think if you want to move into this Web 2.0 area, I think the institution has to make innovation in teaching a strategic goal. Not innovation in technology, but innovation in teaching, based on evaluation, based on evidence-based, do the students learn better and do they learn more? But you have to reward it. Otherwise it's not going to happen. I think there should be planning at an academic program level, and it should include not just the faculty, but also learning technology specialists who can advise on what's possible and what isn't possible, particularly in areas like science, where you have to, or technology, where you have to have this mix of practical and theoretical work. Systematic faculty training in teaching and technology. By systematic, I mean everybody gets trained, not just those who feel they need the training, because otherwise how are we going to prepare people to make the change? And that the show of hands early on told me something, that you need systematic training, not just training on an optional basis. And that means having a training plan, because people will be at different stages of development, so the same course won't apply to everybody, but there's a range of choices of courses within that plan. And this is the one thing my latest book is all about, which is trying to orientate, I call it, rather than train, the senior management of an institution about the implications of the move to new technologies. There's a whole set of things around funding, building up a learning technology support team, making choices about what the IT department does and what the IT department doesn't do. Those things are really about governance. They're about who makes decisions in the institution and where those decisions are best made. And I need another lecture on that, but basically I believe that decisions have to be made throughout the organisation, from the individual instructor up to the senior management, and it's working out which of those decisions are best made at the different levels. And lastly, reward innovation in teaching. So in conclusion, for many students there are real benefits from online learning, particularly the flexibility and the development of 21st century skills. We do know how to teach effectively online now. We've got a lot of research on this. We know what best practice is, and we should be following those best practices. But we also need to innovate, because we have new opportunities and new tools to do that. The question then becomes, what delivery mix works best for your students and your subject matter? And lastly, it's an exciting time to be an instructor and a student. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Gary and Tony. They were very powerful words, and I would like to invite anybody that wants to ask a question for either Gary or Tony. Maybe you guys can stand beside me and see if there's any questions.
We'll stand with you. You're in administration.
And we're right behind you, Karen.
Thank you.
That's good.
Do you want to text anonymity first?
It's 6:04.
555.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Oh, will your slides be online somewhere?
Sorry?
Will your slides be online somewhere?
Yes?
I make it a personal habit never to put things
Online?
no.
Yes, if VCC does, I'm sure Karen will do it, but if not, you can go to my website, tonybates.ca, and they'll be there, right?
Great.
And I think what I'll commit to doing is in the VCC website, under the events, attached to the poster for this presentation, we'll add 2 more documents, and there'll be the presentations. Maybe we'll PDF them, because one of them is very big, and it'll take a while to download, but we'll PDF them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll put my slides on Tony's website.
Yeah. That's excellent.
You're very welcome, Gary.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Maybe we'll send everybody to Tony's website. Any other questions? Comments? Maggie?
Well, I was interested in what you had, your stats on use of Moodle in institutions across Canada and BC. And I was just wondering how that information is gathered, because when you say an institution is using Moodle, what does that mean? Does that mean every classroom is on it, or
Yeah.
the institution has said,
Okay.
okay, we're going with Moodle, but then they have a process for training? Because I know at our institution we have some of that, but I would say it's a bit uneven in
No.
how it's used.
All we did,
About BCC as an institution using Moodle.
it was a commissioned study, a study that was commissioned by Contact North in Ontario. And my colleague Keith Hampson and I worked on this, but he did the survey. And he simply looked at he went to each college and university across Canada and looked at what they were using. Didn't look at how much they were using it or what depth they were using it, and most institutions had focused on one tool, one learning management system. There were, I think, 5 altogether that had more than one officially recognised. So all we did was to say, do you have Moodle or not? Do you have Black